Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Bit about my guest. Our friend Betsey Lewis is joining us again, and I'm very happy to have her back. It's always such a pleasure. For those of you that may not know who she is, let me tell you a little bit about her. She is an international psychic medium, as well as the host of the Rainbow Vision Network since 2009. She is an Earth Mysteries investigator and Earth Keeper. At 8 months old, Betsey had her first UFO encounter with her parents. At age 7, she was chased by a massive UFO, and at 3, she communicated with invisible beings. She had her spirit visitation by her deceased grandfather at age 8, and the paranormal experiences have not stopped. She is joining us today to talk about her new book, which has just been released, Earth Energy, Return to Ancient Wisdom. And Earth Energy provides profound and insightful knowledge for returning to proven ancient and indigenous wisdom practiced successfully through the ages. So without further ado, let's welcome Betsey Lewis back to the Just Bernard Show. Hi, Betsey. How are you today?
Hi, Bernard. Great to be back on your show. I love your show. It's just such a pleasure to have such a great host.
I appreciate that.
And you're one of my favorite.
Thank you. They all say that. I wonder if it's true. No, I'm kidding.
I think it's quite true.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Betsey. And you're always a pleasure to have on, as well as not only that, I follow you on Facebook. I love reading your posts, and you provide so much information in between all the books that you release. Now, Betsey, you're a quick writer, aren't you? You write like about 2 books a year, it seems like.
Well, yeah, it's going to slow down a little bit here, but yeah, it has been. It's just been pouring out of me. I don't know why, but I just feel this need to get things out. I don't know why. Like everything is speeding up. Don't you feel that too, Bernard?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I was reading an article on writers. As I've only had one book out, but as a writer, there was this article talking about that authors are probably one of the most unhappy people, because we're not happy until we get everything out.
How true.
And it's like they have this driving force to get this information out. And for me, I'm working on my second book, and I just don't have time with all these distractions, so I'm really unhappy.
I know we want it now, don't we?
I want it now. I have to put it out now. But anyway, so Betsey, let me ask you about your motivation for the book. I think, and I feel the Earth Energy a topic is very important, especially right now on our planet. A lot of people are very interested in what's happening. What was your motivation to write this book and your inspiration?
Well, I've always loved the environment, the outdoors. I grew up outdoors practically. My parents, I was very blessed to have parents that loved the outdoors, and we were camping and fishing and just doing all kinds of things. My grandfather had property in northern Nevada, so we would go there, and we were in high desert area, so there were lots of animals, bobcats and skunk and porcupine and all kinds of animals would come into our camp area. And I was very young at the time, but I would watch things. I remember my mom said I got into an ant pile. I was so curious about ants, and I've just been that way all my life. And when I was 11 going on 12 years old, my parents purchased this resort, which was kind of it wasn't a build-up resort or anything, but it was in the not in the Grand Canyon, but in the Snake River Canyon of Idaho. And I was around water. I was swimming. My sister and I were riding horses down there. We were hiking all over. I mean, it was just incredible. And of course, the Snake River. We were in Hagerman and just a lot of outdoor things. So I've always had this great appreciation for Mother Earth and for the animals. And what I see now is breaking my heart because we are going through so many changes. The earth has become sick, and we are hearing this from the Indigenous people. They're warning us that something is going to happen. And when you look at what's going on with the earth right now, we're hearing these mysterious booms all over the world. And 15 states have been reporting them lately. Linda Moulton Howe from Coast to Coast has been talking about it. And it's just getting worse out there.
You know, I noticed that you posted something about that this morning. It happens to be from my old stomping ground in South Florida in Coral Gables. What was that about?
Well, there's been a couple of things. A meteor was seen, and we've got all these meteors coming in, to Earth's atmosphere lately and causing these booms. But also, I think some of these booms are just deep Earth core movement. The Earth is moving. And there's just been a lot of things that indicate that with these strange earthquakes. There's quakes that aren't even being recorded by the USGS, and quakes in places that have never had earthquakes. We're getting swarms in Lakeview, Oregon, tons of earthquakes, and Oklahoma and Kansas, tons of earthquakes going on there. And I think the earth is being stretched like a rubber band. And I think pretty soon that rubber band's going to break.
Yeah. And they just said, I just saw recently in an article that Oklahoma is now the #1 earthquake capital for the U.S. and beat California.
Can you believe that? It's just amazing.
And we're not helping with the fracking.
No, we're not. No, I think that has a lot to do with it. We just aren't taking care of Mother Earth. And we've got to get back into, honoring Mother Earth and respecting that everything is connected and we're connected to it. And talking to everything, the trees, everything has a consciousness. Plants have consciousness, and the elements, everything is so amazing, and we've got to get back to that. And that's what I want people to do. I think with all these earth changes coming up, once we understand the warnings, the signs, then there's always warnings and signs when things start happening, then people will be able to survive all these things. And the Indigenous people have been told by the sky beings that these things are going to happen. And here we are. I had dreams of them when I was 7 years old. I had recurring dreams of big, big earth changes. And here we are. I knew it was going to happen sometime later in my life.
Yeah, me too. As a matter of fact, I remember not recently, in the last couple decades, a woman had me do a reading for her on her newborn child. Wow. And I said, unfortunately, her world is going to be completely dead or something to that effect. And I don't know where that came from. I didn't mean to say it like that.
Whoa.
I was like, her world will be dead was like the answer. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And and I still get those dreams, but I do have hope. I hold on to hope, and I realize that it's going to probably get worse before it gets better. A great example, just what was it last week when the train cars spilt over in West Virginia, and now they're rerouting them through my town.
Oh, great!
And they're not supposed to be doing that.
My gosh!
Our rail system is not set up for these oil tankers or whatever they're called, but it's all for profit. And so, one of the Native American sayings is, you can't eat money. You'll know you can't eat money when all the trees are gone or something like that.
Right.
Is that our hope? Do we have to change our economy?
I think we have to change our way of living in order to survive on this planet. There's 7.2 billion people on the planet right now, and we are just using up all our natural resources. We can't continue at this rate. We're chopping down, clear cutting the Amazon and trees give us oxygen. I mean, it's so amazing. I think they give off like 260 pounds of oxygen per tree per year.
Wow.
So, we just can't continue with this. We've got to reconnect with the living library of Mother Earth. And when we connect to these mysteries, the age-old secrets of spirit beings that watch and guide us, that's incredible things open up to us. But we've forgotten that we're so involved with our physical world, our technical, world, our gadgets and our
Right.
electrical things, that we've forgotten that there's another world, a spiritual world around us. And once we reconnect to that, like I said, amazing things happen, and doors will open that haven't been open to us before. But Mother Earth feels us and we feel her. We're kind of a symbiotic relationship here. And right now we're not taking care of ourselves either. We're not honoring ourselves. And when we do that, all that, people are feeling right now, a lot of fear. We're hearing all these things about terrorists in the media, and tons of hate and everything else, and that's all going into Mother Earth. That's pure energy that's going into her, and it's negative energy. And where do you what do you think that's going to do? With 7.2 billion people on the Earth, that's a lot of energy, negative energy.
I couldn't agree more. And the sad part is that it's all man-made fear. I feel like saying sometimes, you want to fear something, fear not having any air to breathe, fear not having anywhere to live,
Right. Right, Bernard. It's so true. And I know there's so many spiritual people out there and so many awakening, people listening to your show, and people like you that have such a wonderful show. But, more of us have to come together. And I wish we could do another harmonic convergence like Dr. Jose Arguelles did in 1987.
Yep.
He brought millions of people together before the internet. People heard about it worldwide and meditated on August 16th and 17th. And it was amazing. Did you do it?
I probably was 17 years old.
Whoa.
And they had this big concert at Six Flags Atlantis with Cyndi Lauper, and Cyndi Lauper led the whole thing.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that is so cool.
It was very cool. She made everybody be quiet and do the meditation. It was very cool.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But I wish we would. And I do agree with you. It is about, I was talking about that last week in the art of magic and spell casting, that when you have a large number of people focusing on one particular intention, it really it amplifies it immensely.
It does, absolutely.
And unfortunately, it goes the same way with the negative.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, you're so right. And I've added all these prayers in my book, Indigenous prayers, but also some meditations in there that I think will help us. And we can we can all do our part. It's amazing what we can do.
Now, Betsey, I don't know if you have this in your book, but this is one of my concerns, and I say this because I live where I live. I live in a small city, and all of my younger friends, let's say people that are maybe 10, 20 years younger than me, yes, I'm that old, and I have friends that young, but they want to move to the big city. They can't stand all the forests, and they want to live in the concrete jungle. And what I don't know if you talk about it in the book, but I mean, I know it's a form of brainwashing from the media and whatnot, but what can we do to perhaps, inspire younger people to really start enjoying the nature again? I feel that, again, it's the wrong way to go about it. Moving to the city is not the way to go, especially when the what hits the fan. You don't want to be in a big city.
The shift hits the fan.
When the shift hits the fan, you want to be close to a river or a mountain or the trees or whatnot.
You do.
But beyond that, the idea that living in a big city is such a great thing, how how do we help people reconnect? I guess is a good question. Again, I don't know if you wrote about this in your book, but I'm just throwing
Hmm.
this out from left field. What can we
No,
do to
that's great.
inspire people to reconnect with nature?
Well, with these earth changes, and I think we've got some big, big earth changes coming up. I think the cities aren't going to be the place to be because you're trapped there.
Yeah.
How are you going to get out? We've already seen what happened with Sandy and Katrina, people trying to get out of the cities, gridlock, nobody can get out. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
There won't be water, there won't be food. If you're in a smaller place, you're away from the cities, you're going to survive. And that's what the indigenous people say. They say we're the ones that are going to survive because we've been surviving off the earth all these thousands of years. And
Yes.
here you are living in the cities, expect to go to a grocery store and get your food and get your water. But what happens when it runs out? What do you do?
Yeah.
Where do you go?
Well, that happened here just last week. This weekend, we had a mini snowstorm, and the shelves
Mhm.
were empty. There was nothing in the shelves.
Right,
I was like,
right.
I guess the trucks were blocked from the snow or something like that.
Wow. And, we've learned a good lesson about FEMA and the government helping anybody.
Yeah.
Forget it. Right? No way.
You better hope it's an election year.
Mhm. Yeah.
But so I guess what you're saying is that perhaps we need to educate people to the realities of what it's like not to have natural resources available.
Right.
You know?
People think maybe it's a joke, it's not going to happen. But, Earth has gone through some horrendous type of earth changes for millions of years. And I think it happens every so often that the earth cleanses itself. And it's going to go through that again. Mother Earth has to protect herself. And it's going to happen again. And I think all these booms, these sinkholes, these strange earthquakes, people are seeing strange lights, which I think is piezoelectric. It's from the crystals in the earth that are grinding together. We're going to see more of that. We're going to hear more of the booms. And there's going to be all kinds of warnings. The animals are going to warn you if you listen and watch them. And, there's always the warning. So I think once we get in tune again, and what the indigenous people say is that we can lessen the earth changes. We can
Hmm.
through prayer, talking to Earth, Mother Earth, ask her to lead you to a safety area. I've been telling people for a long time, stay away from the coastal areas if you
Oh
can.
yeah, yeah.
And if you feel an earthquake, get to higher ground as fast as you can.
Yeah, and that's how I ended up here in Roanoke, quite honestly.
Did you? Wow.
My gut just it was a divine thing that happened. I ended up here and I said, "You know what? I'm staying here. I feel safe here." I figured, I have mountains around me and there's a river and there's a forest. I'll be okay.
Hmm. You're so intuitive
You
and
know.
you're trusting your intuition, and that's what people have to get back to. And I know there's some people who say, oh, I don't have in, intuition or sixth sense, but we all have it. Our ancestors had it and had to survive. They didn't have the internet or cell phones to warn them of disasters. They knew, they trusted their intuition. And I think a good example of that is the Indonesian earthquake and tsunami in 2004, when elephants and birds started going to
Yeah.
higher ground and tourists were running down to the ocean, the people that lived there, when the water backed out, and all of a sudden it came rushing back with a tidal wave. So we've got to trust what's going on. Like I said, it's just amazing. But the indigenous people see these changes, and they're telling us we've just got to get back to a more natural way of life, more compassionate life, more caring life.
And it's inevitable that we have to. Well, I
Mhm.
believe that the universe kind of forces us into our evolution, whether we like it or not, and it's going to be very uncomfortable unless we relax our muscles, so
Mhm.
to speak, and go with the
Right,
flow. Um,
right.
now, we're talking about some of the indigenous. Now, we know that the Native American elders, indigenous people have talked about this for quite a while. In your book, you talk about the Maya Tala, the star
Hmm.
beings who have warned
Hmm.
them.
Right.
What? Why do you feel is this such a common thread? Besides the fact that maybe they were, like you said, told of the star, they were told by the star beings. But isn't it interesting how all of these cultures from around the world have the same story to tell?
Right, isn't it? I know. They're they're sensing things that are just amazing. Sorry about that. I've got my allergies going here this morning.
That's quite all right.
I'm sorry. But yeah, they have been told by different star beings, and I think we have many star beings out there watching us, not always benevolent, but kind of a mixture of malevolent and benevolent, and some that are just kind of watching us and observing us. So I think we're getting help from some of these star beings and some of the angelic beings too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jelly beans too.
Yes. You know, just like I said, the idea of all this coming from so many different cultures has
Hmm.
to give us some kind of clearer perspective of where humanity is headed. And,
Right.
I feel that perhaps one of the greatest obstacles that we have is the
Hmm.
politicizing of all of this. And we see it in the conspiracy world. We see it in the activist world. We see it in the consciousness world, where people are either denying climate change or people are like, "Oh, it's the NWO telling us that the world is going to end, so they're going to save us." Or you know, where does that all come into all of this? How can we shift through all the shift? How do we shift through all the
Right.
shift and get to the truth of the
Yeah,
matter?
I know there's so much out there. On the YouTube, I see people putting up things about UFOs, and they're photoshopped or whatever they need to do, special effects to create a UFO. And there's so much garbage out there. The cesspool of,
Yeah,
of
of
knowledge, isn't it?
disinformation. Yeah,
It is.
it's a
And
cesspool of disinformation.
it is. Oh, it is. You just have to trust your intuition again. And what feels right to you? Does it make sense? Does it feel right? Um, I think that's the best way to do it, to get through all of that. And for me, the indigenous people are just so amazing. And during the 90s, I spent 10 years doing vision quests, and I did some sweat lodges and went to powwows, and I just learned so much from these people. I had two, I say, my teachers, because they taught me so much, was Ed McGaw, Eagle Man, and he's still alive. He's writing books, and he's Oglala Sioux. He's registered Oglala Sioux, and also Corbin Harney, who passed away in 2007. And he was just amazing. We were going to do a big gathering of indigenous people in Sundance, Utah, with Robert Redford's resort.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Redford was all for it, but at the time he was filming The Horse Whisperer, and we got an email saying, "Nope, sorry,
Mm,
can't make it, can't do it." He just thought there'd be too many people at it. And it just wouldn't work out because his resort is pretty small.
right.
So that never happened. But Corbin Harney was.
Oh, Betsy,
It's
we got a
time.
break coming up.
Okay.
We will
All right.
continue our discussion with Betsey Lewis on Earth energy when we return. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are so grateful to have Betsey Lewis with us here today, talking about her new book, Earth Energy, Return to Ancient Wisdom. Welcome back to the show, Betsy. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
Hi, welcome back.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize this phone was in here.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right.
Ah.
That's what we love about live shows, all the little mix-ups and the
You know,
burping and the sneezing and other things, you know. No
oh,
kidding.
great. Live. Oh, yes.
We keep it genuine. At least we're not, we're not fake or plastic. Anyway, hey, Betsy, in your book, I noticed that you talked about how the indigenous tribes practice earth wisdom in their own daily
Hmm.
lives. Could you
Hmm.
describe for our listeners a little bit about what you talked about?
Well, like Corbin Harney, who was the spiritual leader of the Shoshone Nation, he passed away in 2007. But he said, we've got to get back to talking to everything because everything is alive and has a consciousness. And he said that's something we've forgotten, to talk to the trees, to talk to the plants, because they do hear us, even rocks. And it sounds crazy, but everything is part of the great spirit or God consciousness. So we're all related to everything. And when we do, it's amazing. It hears everything. Like indigenous people, if they take the life of an animal for food, they pray over it. They do a ceremony, they thank it. And I think we've forgotten about those prayers and how important they are. And even when they cut down a tree for a sun dance, they thank the tree, they do a ceremony again, and it's that blessing that they do. And who does that anymore?
No, I
I
know.
know probably you do, and other people that are aware of all these things that are alive with the planet. But I think
It's
we're
not the
so
norm anymore,
no,
unfortunately.
no, it's not. And prayers are passé. It's like it's called intentions and everything, and that's okay.
Right.
But prayers, good old-fashioned prayers, are so important, and they do make a difference. I think when Apollo 13 went up and the astronauts were in dire situation of not coming back to Earth, and all around the world people prayed, and I think that had a big influence. I think when we do come together we can make changes because we're powerful spiritual beings. We are pure energy.
Yeah.
And let's
It's
get
been
back to that.
forgotten. Yeah, it's been forgotten. It's been
It
forgotten.
has. It
And
has.
I
Yeah.
can't help but notice I do what I do because I love what I do. It's not a business for
Mhm.
me. I'm not trying to sell anything. And it's just very strange when I see how we have come to a place, and I know this might sound a little weird, but the reality of it is I'm seeing that unless you package it all nice and shiny, people don't pay attention.
Mhm.
In other words,
Mhm.
we can call prayer prayer, but unless it's on an app, they're not going to do it. So there
Right.
seem to be a lot of
Right.
obstacles in our way, a lot of distract. And I
Mhm.
guess that's the point I'm trying to make, is that there are just so many distractions of I don't want to say returning to the simple ways of living.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything simple about it. It's very hard to get to that place,
Right.
but we seem to be so distracted
Mhm.
that we're disconnected from our own inner being, and I believe our inner being already knows that that's the right thing to do. I
Mhm.
remember going through my, how shall I say, my second awakening. I had my first awakening in my 20s, my second in my when I turned 40, actually.
Wow.
And I remember saying to myself, everything that I used to make fun of is actually right. Everything I thought was cheesy and fluffy is actually the right way to live. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
being
Right.
nice is
Right.
actually very good. Not being so picky is actually very
Mhm.
good. Not being snobby or materialistic is the right way to be.
Right.
And it just seems like our culture has pulled us from our intuitive beings, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, uh,
Right.
you
Right.
also you talk about the elemental spirits a little bit. Tell us what you mean by that. The earth, air, fire, and water spirits.
Well, they all, I believe, all have that consciousness, but there are spirit entities, I believe, connected to all these things. And, the stories of leprechauns, and I go into some of the mythology, leprechauns, um, and just other spirits, fairies. I think they all exist.
Hmm.
And, there's stories of them, the little people all over the world. So I think they help with the earth and take care of things. And, like we've forgotten about them too.
Absolutely.
That they do exist, I think. And what's amazing is like mountains, people go to the mountains to have vision quests. And all over the world, they've gone to high, tall mountains to have these incredible vision quests. And there is a lot of negative charged energy, ions there. And those ions are good. It's the positive charged ions that are, make us irritable and feel on edge. But the negative ones, like rushing water, moving water, ocean, waves, that's all negative charged ions. And there is that greater concentration of ions. So I think that gives people the visions that they want. And I think that's why temples were built and pyramids built, because there was that concentrated energy at the top.
Absolutely, and that goes right in with what you're talking about, this earth energy that we're just barely scratching the surface with on a scientific level. Like I remember when I first heard about negative ions, they used to say, "Oh, go to the beach, you'll get negative ions." I'm like, I don't want negative ions. I want positive. No, you want negative ions.
You're right. You're right. It does sound kind of weird to say negative, but I lived in Los Angeles, and talk about when dry winds come up, like the Santa Anas in Los Angeles, Southern California, people get very angry, upset, irritable. And I've noticed that, the change in people. And when just before a storm, a lot of times people get kind of irritated because you have both the negative and the positive going on until the rainstorm comes. And then you feel at peace with the moving water. And I think that has a lot to do with ley lines too around the world, because the water that runs through there, maybe crystals and water. So there is a lot of energy in water.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, we had a guest on. I want to have him come back on. Actually, Richard
Mm-hmm.
Benassi. He talks about all the underwater rivers and currents that
Mm-hmm.
people don't even realize how it affects our mood, our living,
Right.
our evolution or lack of spiritual evolution as well,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as the earth energies, like you were talking about, the ley
Yep.
lines and whatnot. People are very, very I don't know if I don't know. I don't want to say not aware of it, but maybe they're skeptical of it.
Yeah. Right.
And again, it goes from the programming that we have. Uh,
Mhm.
if I can, I want to change the direction a little bit here. I might get a little conspiratorial here. I hope you don't mind, but
I love it. I love it.
I can't help. Now here we are talking about how people are disconnected and whatnot, and how there's so much of an obstacle for the masses of humanity to reconnect with themselves, and it just seems like we've had everything from organized religion to make people afraid of
Mhm.
energy or power or magic or anything like that, whatever you want to call it, native practices. And the general mood, we have a culture just sucking down antidepressants and everything, and everyone's depressed.
Right.
It's like I have my
Yeah.
moments, but they don't last very long anymore, thank goodness. But it just seems like there's a whole consciousness of I don't want to be here, so I don't care what happens to the earth.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and that concerns me. That really concerns me because as we talked about in the beginning of the show, how we have to want to be here. We want to reconnect. So basically, what this is bringing me to is the idea of okay, here's this Illuminati, New World Order, whatever you want to call them, the global elites that are basically destroying humanity and destroying the planet for profit.
Hmm.
What I can't help but wonder what is it that they're going to get out of this if the planet's destroyed and the people are dead. What are
You
they
know,
getting out of it?
that's a very good question, Bernard. Very good question. I've asked that too. You know, do they know something that we don't know,
Yeah,
that
right.
they are going to go underground? They have, supposedly they're
Yeah,
building all these,
lots of bases. Yep.
subterranean, you know, shelters and everything. Um, I don't know. Do they think they're going to go underground and we're all going to die on top of the earth and they'll take over and, but what's going to be left of the world, and who are they going to have for their slaves to mow their lawns and
Right.
take care of their houses and, the elite? I mean, that's insane. And I think about these chemtrails, these people have children, and
Yes.
that there's something bad in those chemtrails that they've been dumping on us since the 1990s, and it's got to stop.
And I get that question all the time. People are like, well, why would they be spraying chemtrails if everyone's going to be sprayed?
Hmm.
And again, I mean, for me, I'm as far as chemtrails is concerned, I've kind of, how shall I say, I've tried to be logical about it and say, well, maybe they're trying to curb global warming, but it's still poison. It's still, all these horrible
Hmm.
barium, aluminum, and everything. So,
Yeah.
well, if
Yeah.
you're going to stop global warming and we're all dying and the plants and the soil is poisoned, what good is it? You know?
Exactly. I know. It's just insanity out there what we're doing. The chemtrails have been going on, what we're doing, what they did down on the Gulf, with the Gulf spill, the BP oil spill, and they put these dispersants on there. They thought they were going to break up the oil, and they
Yep.
made it even worse.
Yeah.
It's going to take hundreds of thousands of years for the Gulf to recover, and we only have one Earth. I mean, if it's gone, they can go to Mars, but there's nothing on Mars, and there's no other planet in the solar system like ours with the water, the air, everything is perfect. We're not too close to the sun, to burn up. We're not too far away like Neptune to freeze. Everything seems to be perfect and in harmony. And
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting that there are legends that many Indigenous people have, like the Australian Aboriginals. They talk about a time when they came here from another planet because their planet was being destroyed, and they saw that Earth needed to balance the grid, and so they came here to balance it. And they say right now, because we have taken the uranium out of the Earth, the oil, the water, we're taking out all the minerals, that the earth is wobbling and it's out of balance. And if we don't stop that, that wobbling is going to shift the earth's axis. So,
Yeah.
they have those legends, and I think there's something to it. I really do.
Very interesting that they have these legends. I've come to a point now where I think I trust ancient legends more than I trust, the media science. I'll call it media science because I don't actually
Yeah.
talk to the scientists. Maybe if I talk to them, I'd get another answer. But what the
Yeah.
media tells you, about these things, it's much more, for me, intuitively correct to say, what, these guys know what they're talking about. The indigenous people. I mean, we're seeing the North Pole shifting. I mean, we're seeing
Hmm.
that. We
Hmm.
just saw the sun did a pole flip recently.
Right. Right. Exactly. And the sun is doing some strange things. It's been flatlining lately, nothing going on, which is kind of weird, but it does affect our weather. And look at our crazy weather lately. It's just been insane. I've never seen anything like it. Extreme temperatures, record-breaking temperatures everywhere. And the severe drought in the west and the southwest, and the the Arctic, you know, Express or the Siberian Express just keeps coming. I feel so sorry. I know you're in that area too. You've been getting
Hmm.
horrible weather. So I think
It's
this is going to continue. I hate to say it, Bernard, but I just keep having these feelings that everything is going to accelerate even more. We're just seeing the beginning of it.
unfortunately that's how I feel. I feel
Really?
that we're going to get to a breaking point where people are just going to have to get fed up enough to change it. But I will say this: I'm very hopeful for humanity because of the fact that I Well, let me start off with the politics, and I don't want to get too political here, but let's just say that now we're starting to see a shift in American politics where people are like, okay, now we have to go after corruption. Now we have to go after the torturers. Even the New York Times posted an article today about how we have to prosecute the torturers from 9/11, from that era, I'm like, wow. So if the consciousness is going to change that way with politics, perhaps we can start grasping at the idea that we have to change our consciousness when it comes to our planet. And so I am hopeful, but I feel, unfortunately, it's going to get worse, probably a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of it we're going to see in our lifetime, Betsy. And, hopefully we'll still have air to breathe throughout this lifetime. In my book, and I know you read my book, but in my book, there was a warning that they were going to start turning the air into a commodity. And
they'll sell the air.
They'll
right?
sell the air,
Yeah.
And I'm like, they did the water, they're doing the water, they've done the land, they've done everything else. What's that? And wasn't there a movie where they did that? It was a Disney movie. Was it Up? I think it was called Up.
Right.
Where they literally sold the air. You had to buy the air. I was like, is this prophetic? This is from Disney. I'm like, or Pixar.
Yeah. Corbin Hardy talked about that. He had visions that the water talked to him. He said when he was praying over the water said to him, I'm going to look like water, but pretty soon nobody's going to use me. And look what's happened. Who would have thought that, when I was growing up during the 50s and 60s, that we'd have to pay for bottled water, in plastic containers. Never,
I'm still aghast about that. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was growing up, we had Avion, but only, the country club ladies had Avion.
Right. Right.
We had Avion misters. I remember that. They had a misting bottle with Avion, but
sure.
But for everybody to do that every single day, I remember we used to drink out of the sink.
Yeah. And in some areas, I know where you're located. You're in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that where they've been doing some fracking and people actually turn on their water and they get gas and they can light it?
Well, that's West Virginia, but we're close to them. And
are you?
And they haven't started fracking in Virginia yet, but they did just sell leases of all places in the Jefferson National Forest to allow that.
Oh, jeez.
And so it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Again, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But, and right away I can hear already, I'm hearing the email, you're fear porning. If we don't talk about this, how are we going to bring this attention? I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that we need to learn about this in order to make some changes in the way that we live.
Right.
But unfortunately, this is our reality.
It is. And I think we all have to speak out. We can all do our part. Each one of us, and it's so important that, all the one people come together. And if we speak out and if we start telling people we don't like this and we don't like that, we're speaking up. And Corbin talked about it. He used to be afraid to speak out, that he said he was behind the bush, which he called. And I think I was like that too for a long time, afraid to speak out. But I think we all have to start speaking out now and saying enough is enough. I've had enough. I can't take it anymore,
Yeah.
Stop the insanity out there. We can do so much. And like I've talked about toxic foods, I write about it in the book because, there's so much toxic food that, it's affecting all of us. The GMOs, the lauryl sulfate that's in everything, there's just GMO corn syrup, fluoride, in our water. We've got to tell them no more, and if we stop buying these things and read the labels and say, no, I'm going to go for natural food, that's going to force these manufacturers to start, getting us natural food and better food.
I agree. And it's very interesting. I think I saw, was it yesterday, Hershey's announced they're going to take out GMOs of their chocolate bar and their Kisses by the end of the year. I love the way they say by the end of the year because they have to sell all the poison first. But
you're right.
We still got to sell what we have on the shelf. But by the end of the year, you won't have any more poison.
Isn't that nice?
But somebody said to me, and this is very, I love my libertarian brothers and sisters. Don't get me wrong. I used to be a libertarian, but someone said to me, "Well, I still think they have the right to sell GMO if they want to." I'm like, well, okay, as a human right, yes, okay, maybe they could label it, but labeling something that is GMO is not the same as saying this tomato has been spliced with the gene of an orangutan. You know,
Right.
it, it,
Or a
they don't,
pig.
or a pig, or
Yeah.
what is in the splicing? Why is it genetically
Hmm.
modified? Is what I want to know.
Hmm.
So GMO labeling is a band-aid as far as I'm concerned. What are the long-term effects? What has happened? Why are people getting sick? Why are people getting cancer? And you hear the debunkers constantly saying, "Oh, well, they have done studies," but who's done the studies?
Right. Exactly. It's Frankenfood, Bernard, right?
Right? You want to eat a tomato with salmon genes, or a strawberry with a frog genes? I mean,
No, thank you.
you know,
No.
It's just like that meme I see going around Facebook. All you have to do is put the word "study says," and everybody will say, "Oh, well, then it's got to be true then."
yeah, exactly. We have to say study says so you'll believe us.
Or it's natural. I mean, watch for that, word too. That could mean anything natural.
Yes, exactly. What naturally? What naturally GMO?
Yeah.
Isn't everything kind of natural? Even plastic is natural.
Yeah, I
It's just
guess it is. It comes from
chemically
oil.
altered. That's all.
Yeah.
People don't understand that we're being manipulated to allow this problem to continue with our planet. We'll be right back after this break.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are speaking with Betsey Lewis today about her new book called Earth Energy, Return to Ancient Wisdom. And just before the break, I think we all went on a little rant about GMO. Thank you, everybody. And, one of the things that I feel that people don't realize is so, so important, and we mentioned it a little while ago, and that's water. And we're seeing the water, being polluted. We're seeing water being bought up as a natural resource. And I know in your book you talk a little bit about the natural springs. And of course, someone's going to buy them, so we have to start hiding them. But
Right. Right.
what do natural springs and hot springs have that can be beneficial for us?
Well, a lot of people claim that they're healing. There are hot springs all over the West, and I'm sure you have them back there, and they are healing. I have been to many hot springs, and I know that energy from the earth is incredible. It really does do some healing. But there's places like Lourdes, Bernadette, who found the water in Lourdes, France, and people have gone there for the water. She was told by the Virgin Mary to dig in a certain area, and the water started bubbling up, and people have been healed,
Yeah.
miraculous healings. So there's something to water, and if it's geomagnetic energy or what it is, but natural hot springs are incredible. And I think it's just the moving water. It's part of Mother Earth. It's all natural. And what a shame that we are polluting so much of the water everywhere, even our oceans. And, I just read an article which shocked me about ocean acidification, which is from carbon dioxide that, from all over the earth is going right into the oceans. And they are saying that the carbon dioxide in our oceans burns up and deforms the smallest, most abundant food in the bottom of the deep blue food chain, and they're called butterflies, sea butterflies, and the whole ocean depends on this, and now they're dying, which causes something else to die, which causes something else. It's that whole domino theory. Everything starts dying, and we're seeing the bleaching of the coral reefs all around the world. They're dying, and it's so important for the coral, because they have all this different food for the little animals. When I was in Belize, I spent a lot of time off the coast of Ambergris Caye, and it was amazing to see all these beautiful fish and the beautiful coral reefs and everything, and to think that all these things are dying. Every day we hear about sea creatures dying in mass. Sea stars started melting off the coast of California all the way up to Alaska, and they still don't know what's causing that. They think there's some kind of disease or something that's gotten in, if it's the warming of the oceans or what. But even seals off the coast of California are starving to death, and they don't know why. There's not enough food. Something is breaking down in the whole, ocean environment. So, it's got to change.
And it's I don't want to say it's so funny, but it's common logic or common reasoning to realize that everything, the balance of life is just like a mathematical equation. If you have one variable missing, you're going to change that entire equation.
Right, right.
And going back to water, I couldn't help while you were talking to think about the idea of what you said about the bottled water. I think about the work of Emoto and how water has the emotion of the water can really change the makeup of that water, and it's, I never thought of this before, but it kind of reminds me of the whole bottled water phenomenon we're going through. It reminds me of industrial farming and the poor energy of the animals that we're eating and the way that they're treated. Well, the same thing could be said for that water. That water is being treated. It's definitely not getting any respect or any love. So that energy is out of it. So it's like dead water, even though you're paying so much money for it.
Right. That's true. And, he found out that if people prayed over the water, it formed perfect, beautiful crystals. Yep. And when they thought negative thoughts over it, they were in perfect crystals. They weren't the beautiful crystals when people, would say positive things and prayers. So that's the way with all things on earth. When we give it negative energy, they don't do well. I learned that, excuse me, when I was 16 and living in Los Angeles, I was invited to a spiritual church. It was all black. I was the only white person there, and they were just wonderful people, and they had plants all around the church, and I'd never seen this, and they gave me a plant, and I thought, well, what am I supposed to do with this? And they said, pray over it. And their plants in this church were beautiful and huge because they prayed over them. And that was the first time I learned about that. Oh. And I thought, how beautiful that these people did that. And I've never seen a church like that since, but
It's amazing what it can do.
It was.
And it just seems like just changing our attitude could heal the planet just by changing our attitude.
Oh, you're so right, Bernard. You are so right. And when you think about the abuse of animals, the animals that we eat, look how they're treated. Animals don't have rights. And, this is in my book about the ag-gag law. This really upsets me greatly. Yeah. So many states have passed this ag-gag law. Have you heard of it?
No, I don't think so. At least not in that term.
Okay. Here in Idaho, they passed it. There was a big to-do about some environmentalists that came in here and heard about the abuse of some cows, a big, huge dairy in Jerome, Idaho, and they videoed what the abuse and put it on the internet, YouTube. And of course there was, this, everybody was just up in arms, especially the farmer that had it. But anyway, they passed this law that you cannot go in and do that without permission from, the owner of, wherever it is, or there will be a year's imprisonment, or I think a $5,000 fine. That means that it's okay that they can get away with abusing animals, that nothing was done about it.
Right,
They
right.
say it's not going on, but I'm sure it is, and it goes on everywhere, the way these animals are treated. Thank goodness there's organic, there's animals that are grass fed and they can, have pastures, green pastures
Yeah,
to live on and exist. And that's the way they should be
yeah.
existing instead of these, cages in these small areas. You see them in California, you go past them and there's just pile of manure, that these poor animals are standing and they don't even know what green pastures are.
Hmm.
And we eat these animals,
Yeah.
it's like, oh.
There's you're making me remember not even a television show, a webcast show on Hulu. It was produced by Chipotle. I
Mm-hmm.
forgot whether it was called Farm Wars or Farm Inc. or one of those. I forgot, but it was exactly about what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It was this activist guy who was trying to expose, the industrial farming and whatnot. And I love that
Right.
Chipotle did it because they're very, non-GMO and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But it disappeared. They had
Really.
out they were supposed to do a couple seasons. They did like 5 episodes and it
Mm-hmm.
disappeared. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, it goes to show you right there, there's something
Yeah.
going on. But there is something that can be done, and at least of the energy of the food. Because when I cook at
Mm-hmm.
home, I do give love to that food. I pray over that food. I
Mm-hmm.
bless the food. You
I do
know,
too.
whatever it is, unfortunately, if I go, my friends think I'm crazy because I draw pentagrams over my plate if I go out to eat. I'm like, I'm blessing the food.
Good for you.
I'm like, I don't know what mood that guy was in when he made that hamburger, so I'm going to put a pentagram on
Right.
it.
It's true. It's true. People put their energy into the food. You're right. You are so right
Yeah,
on about that.
absolutely.
And yeah, to bless it and to thank it is a great way to do it. I was on a talk show recently, which was a horrible experience,
Oh,
horrible host. It was a nightmare, but, he was putting me down for not being a vegetarian. I don't think he was, but,
oh,
because, and I think everybody, if you want to be a vegetarian, that's great. And I think that's wonderful. But I can't eat soy. I can't. I can't tolerate it.
well, you can't
And
find non-GMO soy.
well, that's true.
You
It's in
can't.
everything.
It's
In everything.
90% of the United States
Hmm.
soy is genetically modified with that
Hmm.
insecticide in it. So who would want to eat
Hmm.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. If I could, I would, be mostly vegetarian. I
Right.
don't eat that much meat. I really don't. But yeah,
And
but
again, it's about that attitude.
hmm.
We do.
Hmm.
I know Triva eats very healthy. She eats. I think you're going to go into paleo now, right? Triva, are you there?
I'm gonna try paleo. I
Oh,
don't.
okay, but you're pretty much vegetarian most of the time.
Not
Not 100%, but
well. I haven't. I don't really eat that much fruit and vegetables right now because it's kind of why I want to try that diet because right now I call it stress eating because there's a lot of like
oh,
stress in my life, so I eat like a lot of like
oh, you're
not
stress eating. Okay.
not not the junk food or fast food, just a lot of like foods that I would rather that I'm gonna start trying to avoid now. So
But I guess the point I was trying to make is that so many people get very angry and I
Hmm.
love this correlation that you're not spiritual if you're not vegan.
Yeah,
And
right,
and it's
right.
like, what?
I
Tell that
know.
to the Native Americans who are out there killing buffaloes, you know?
Right.
Like,
Well, think about our ancestors. Does that mean they weren't spiritual? I don't think so. They had to live on protein. And, sometimes they would go months without having any real protein because of the weather or where they were. And then they would, kind of load up on the protein, the deer or the
yeah.
birds or the fish or whatever they could get. So, yeah, humans have always been eating meat. We weren't meant to be cows and and eat vegetables, but that like I said, if people want to do that and they feel better, I think go for it. Whatever makes you feel good. I'm all for it. And the Dalai Lama tried to be a vegetarian, and he said he couldn't do it. He became very sick, so he eats meat too.
Right, right. And again, I understand it does harm the planet. I do understand
Mm-hmm.
that. I understand that,
Mm-hmm.
factory farming is very bad for the environment. But the reality of it is, so is GMO factory farming of soy, GMO factory farming of corn,
Right.
the factory farming of water is harming the environment. So unless I have my own well and my own garden and my own cow, I'm going to be harming the environment at this point in our lives, unfortunately. The only thing we can do is to, I always call it harm reduction. Start thinking about harm reduction. What can I do to, eat, free range chicken eggs, or
Sure.
drink local water from a local spring or something, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good in the garden. I don't even have time for a garden. I'm going to be lucky this spring when I grow basil. I'm all excited. I'm going to be growing basil. I can't live off basil, but I'm
You
going to grow
can't.
it.
Make a lot of spaghetti with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then again, then the pasta is coming from the wheat that's coming from the
That's
this. You know, so we
yeah,
have
right.
to be realistic, and
I know.
a lot of the topics that we are talking about today, we can't get rid of everything in one full swoop. We
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
be realistic, and again, look at it from a sense of harm reduction and changing our consciousness and changing our energy as far as our attitudes when we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
By all means, bless your food. Bless that poor little lamb that was in that box or whatever, veal or whatever. I don't eat veal. I can't handle that. I can't do the idea of a little lamb or cow or whatever being
I
stuck in a
know.
box. I just,
Yeah.
ugh, it makes me sick.
I
But
know.
everything
And the
else,
animals, aren't they amazing though? People don't think they have souls. I think they do, and I think
absolutely.
they're evolving just like everything else on this planet. Even the earth is evolving. Everything is. And people should have more reverence for animals and realize that they're just as special, and they have rights too. They really do. And they need to have rights, although, a lot of them aren't right now.
Yeah. God, I just heard a really great quote today. I forgot who said it,
Did
but it
you?
was in reference to we all have unalienable rights, but to have them, I forgot something like you can have the rights, but it doesn't make it true. Unfortunately, it's
Hmm.
kind of like laws. They
Yeah,
make laws, but kind of like gun control. I laugh at the gun
yeah,
control. I'm like, you think your law is going to make that lunatic not buy a gun? You know,
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
laws don't matter. Rights really, yes, it is the right of the animal to be that way. But until we
Mhm.
change the way that we think, or change our attitude, nothing's really going to change.
Right, right.
You can put as many laws as you want.
Mhm. We were talking about animal abuse. I used to drive by this farm, and this guy had some cows and some horses, and it had been really cold. And I noticed that these horses had been standing in just a small little, fenced area in mud that was probably about a foot deep, really cold and raining. And so I called the Humane Society because I hadn't seen those horses move in days. And I was just really upset about it. And the Humane Society said to me, "We don't handle them." I'm going, "Excuse me?" Yeah. So they said, well, you have to call the agricultural something or other that handles that, for larger animals. So I called them and I complained and I filled out a form that they wanted. And then they tell me that they've tried to do all kinds of things with this guy, that he's had lots of complaints about his animals and what he does, but they can't do anything or get close to his property or he will sue them. So they can't do anything. And I thought, whoa, is this really for real? You can't do anything. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, people can do all this. You hear about people that hoard animals and they don't feed them. Some elderly person has 100 cats that are starving, and things like that. I just don't get it. I really don't.
I don't get it either. I really
No,
don't. Again,
no.
it's the priority. What we're talking about here, priority and attitude. How are we going to change our priorities as individuals, and how are we going to change our attitude if nature is to thrive, if humanity is to thrive, and to not get caught up in the distractions of the world.
Hmm. How true. How true.
It's so funny because I find that people get very distracted about the little things like, oh, that senator said this. He called that woman a whore. Who cares? Or Hillary Clinton eats bears. Really? So, what does this have to do
I
with
didn't
making the
read
world
that.
a better place?
That's funny. Maybe she does.
Yeah, maybe she does. I don't know, but
Yeah.
hey, I have venison in a mason jar right now waiting for me. But my roommate's family are hunters, so they gave us venison for Christmas. So we canned
Wow.
venison.
Wow. Wow.
That's just anyway, again, to the distraction of it, it just seems that we get distracted by so many little things that aren't the big things, and I would like to put a call out to the world that let's think about the big picture. Let's have the opportunity to think about where is our humanity going, what about our planet.
Right.
It's not just about people. It's not just about trees. It's not just about animals. It's not just about voting rights. It's about the whole equation of life itself.
Right.
And that's what
Right.
you're trying to get
Right.
across in the book. There's
Right.
something going on that we need to
Hmm.
really take a look at. And we didn't get a chance to talk about this, and I wanted to. I'm not sure if you brought it up in your book, but when you were talking about the seals and whatnot in California,
Hmm. Hmm.
the whole Fukushima thing, which has
Ah,
totally been ignored,
I know. Yeah.
completely been.
Yeah.
How many tens of thousands of gallons of radioactive waste is being
Oh,
poured every day?
tons. Yeah, and it's still going on. The
Yeah,
leak is still there, and we're still not hearing enough, and perhaps that's why all these sea creatures are dying and starving to death, and, the sea stars and everything else. There's something going on there. And of course, all the plastic and everything that was washed out to sea after the tsunami hit. That's another thing. And plastics take hundreds of years before they actually break down. And the thing is, when they do break down into small pieces, all these fish are eating them,
yeah.
right? So that gets right back into our system. It's just a vicious circle. It really is.
Absolutely, and I can't help but wonder how much of, like you said, the loss of natural life and the
Hmm.
recourse of all this in on the Pacific coast is a part of that.
Right,
And when is it going to end?
right. And
Is this just
radiation,
going to keep happening and happening and happening?
right?
Has anyone bothered to look at this? I mean, of course, mainstream media is not going to cover it,
Mm-mm.
and even people like myself and yourself who are involved in alternative media, this has been going on for years, and I wonder where is this all headed as far as our planet, because eventually it's going to have to make its way around the world.
Right, right. And when you think about all the nuclear plants that are on major fault lines, earthquake fault lines in California, we don't know how to harness radiation, all this, nuclear power. We don't. And look at Japan. What idiots to
Yeah,
build
who
this
thought
on.
of that?
Yeah,
Who thought of that? Let's put a nuclear
on a
reactor on
fault.
this earthquake fault.
Yeah, right. Yeah, brilliant, huh?
Profit,
Well,
profit.
and the thing is, we've got to get away from nuclear. It doesn't. They say that it may never dissipate. That it could last forever. Um, so I don't know. It's something that we've got to address and get back to more natural energy with the sun, with the solar energy, with water energy, wind, and
Absolutely.
there's
Or
yeah.
Tesla coils. Tesla coils
Tesla
for
coils.
everyone.
Yeah, yeah, right on.
It astounds me. It astounds me.
Mhm.
And what really astounds me is, again, and I probably sound like a broken record, is how we defend people's right to profit off the earth.
Mhm.
Oh, well, they have a right to make money. Well, they're killing our planet. Do you think they have the right to kill our planet? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and going back to that attitude, we can be as libertarian, or I personally consider myself a libertarian socialist, a little bit different. We're more European, but the reality of it is doing what you want but harming no one. That's where
Okay.
it has to lie. And these people are just raping the planet and just raping our natural resources, and
You're right.
so many people defend it.
Yeah, we've got to get out of the ego consciousness and back into the heart consciousness. I think that's so important to get back into balance to Aini, which is, the Peruvian people talk about Aini, which is a balance, back into honoring everything. And that's what we keep hearing from the Indigenous people, to honor everything. And and it's kind of interesting. I like Black Elk. He lived from 1863 to 1950, but he had a vision when he was 9 years old from the thunder beings. And some people think it was the star beings of the ETs. But anyway, he was shown how the earth was going to become sick. The animals, the winged ones, the four-legged ones, were going to become frightened. All living things would become gaunt and poor. The air and the waters dirtied and just destroyed. And he saw that a blue man was causing all these things and empowering the sickness. So we know who the blue man is. I think we can figure that one out. But he says that he saw that the blue man was going to be destroyed and killed, and that when the blue man fell, all life would come back upon earth and all things become fresh and healthy again. So, that's a great thought, that
Yeah.
the blue man is going to die, because how can he survive and the earth survive if that continues? We can't.
And again, just the whole idea of well, one of the things that I find, and I think this goes very well with the theme of your book, is that within our culture, we think about immediate, how shall we say, immediate pleasure, immediate reaction.
Hmm.
Right now, what's going to happen right now? What's happening in the stock market right now? What's happening to my life right now? Whereas
Right.
the ancient cultures, I mean, they literally planned generations ahead.
Hmm. Hmm.
You think of how they built Stonehenge. It took them
Right.
hundreds of years to build that, and it was
Hmm.
done from generation to generation to
Hmm.
generation. It wasn't,
Hmm.
oh, we're going to build this in 5 years.
Right. Right.
They thought of the coming generation, and we
Sure they
just
did.
don't have that anymore.
No, that's so true. And the Indigenous people say that what we do today affects 7 generations. And think about that. Everything that we do right now is affecting that generation, the next 7 generations. So what will we give them? What will they think of us 7 generations from now? Will they condemn us for not doing anything for saving the earth? I mean, we have the power to do it now, and I don't think it's too late. It's getting to the point where it's not, enough time to save the earth, but I think we can still do it. And like I said, if we come together, and we come together in mass, if we pray together, you can even do it in small groups. You don't have to have huge groups of people. Just come together and have a group every week or something, and pray for the earth. Go outside, take your shoes off and talk to Mother Earth and have those prayers, and you don't have to do it the Indigenous way. You can do it your way. And ceremony and prayer are so important right now, I think.
Absolutely. And you're reminding me. I did I think it was a video broadcast show with about a year or so ago. Treva, tell me if I'm wrong. It was about a year and a half ago with Miriam Delicato, who works with the Hopi. And she had said the name of the show was "From a Time of Choice to a Time of Consequence," and we're literally at that point. We're at the point where we will no longer have the choices to adjust our way of living and to adjust our attitudes to benefit each other and benefit the earth. We're going to be forced to do it if we don't change our ways right now, it seems.
Right. I don't know how you feel about time travel. I think we probably talked about that and about time, past, present, and future all happening at once. But I've always believed that. And so with time being malleable and you can create everything, because the past is already happening, the future is already happening. But I believe that there are many levels, many planes of existence and dimensions, and maybe even parallel Earths. And so we can change things. We can shift everything and create a new timeline.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Do you?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a big thing going on right now. I don't know if you're friends with Alfred Weber on Facebook, but he's going through this whole timeline change. I don't want to say spiel. I don't want to sound disrespectful, but rant or whatever right now, and I think that's what we need to be doing right now. Anyway, we're going to be taking a short break, and we'll be right back with Betsey Lewis to discuss more interesting topics like these. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are having a fantastic discussion today with Betsey Lewis about earth energy and returning to ancient wisdom. We've covered quite a bit of information, but Betsey, let me ask you something a little bit more about our planet in the sense of vortexes and stargates.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up.
There are many places. I know that I lived I lived in Miami, right off the coast of the Bermuda Triangle, so I heard the stories my whole life. We've seen and heard of many things going on. Look at the Malaysia flight that happened. Do you believe our planet has these?
Oh, I do. And like you said, Bermuda Triangle, there's other places where people have just vanished, totally vanished. On mountaintops, parks lately, people have vanished in the United States. But like you said, that Flight 370 that just vanished, and I believe they will never find anything of that plane. So far, they haven't. Not even any kind of wreckage at all.
Wow.
So where did it go? It just vanished. And caverns, caves are known to have these gateways or into other dimensions. And there are stories of people that have gone into them and vanished, or there are strange, humans or strange beings that live in them. So, there's these great stories. And one of the most interesting stories, and this was on a TV show on Sci-Fi Channel. It was called Ghost Mine. And there were two investigators, Patrick Doyle and Kristen Luman, who joined 9 miners in a remote woods of Sumter, Oregon, which was one of the richest gold mines in the United States. And there were stories of it being haunted, and all these strange things were happening when they were doing all this filming. But in one of the episodes, there were 2 of the miners that went into this area called the ballroom deep within the mine. This was September 11th of 2013. And something really inexplicable happened that day. The 2 men normally would finish around 6 o'clock. Everybody would check out and come out of the mine about 6 o'clock. And the group was beginning to wonder what happened because they hadn't shown up. And finally, they did come out, and they seemed confused, and they believed only an hour had passed, when in fact they had been in the mine for 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
And stranger yet, they hadn't made any progress on clearing the debris barrier. So, they thought, well, maybe electromagnetic energy had played tricks on their mind and caused a disorientation, or maybe it was a lack of oxygen, but they checked the levels, everything was fine. They said there was a little bit higher EMF readings, but that was it. So where did they go for 7 hours? And it really spooked them, the poor guys.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I firmly believe there are some type of vortexes and or stargates on our planet. I mean, it's just it's very reasonable to think that. Now, well, I mean, look at the. I just have to bring this up because you made me think of that Norway spiral thing. It could happen it could happen in the sky as well. People don't realize that. Time and space is a man-made creation, and anything could happen.
Oh yeah.
And our planet has shown us that.
Oh, it has. There's a lot of stories of people that claim that they're walking down the street, in present day time, and all of a sudden they're in another time, the 1800s or something, and they're watching this whole thing go on, and then suddenly they're back in the present day. So, that tells you right there the past is happening, and maybe we're the ghosts of the past, or the.
Absolutely,
it makes you wonder. Yeah,
absolutely, and they're doing more and more research on this, which I find very interesting. I think we recently posted an article about parallel universes and how they're really finding more and more about maybe perhaps when we die we move to a parallel universe in another timeline. Who knows? It's different for everyone, I would think. But also, you talk about Edgar Cayce, one of my favorites. And I've got to say, that's one of the reasons why I moved to Virginia, because he lived here.
Oh,
and
wow.
He said this was one of the safe spots during the chaos.
Good, yes.
And not on the coast, which I don't know why he has the institute over on the coast. I don't know if that was a good idea, but... here we have the metaphysical church headquarters, which I think they were smart to do. But he was the sleeping prophet, and he talks a lot about Atlantis and Mu. And I love hearing about Mu because you never hear much about Mu.
No, you don't.
You really don't. And what did he have to say about how they collapse, and how does that parallel our current civilization?
Oh. I think it's so incredible that he said that most of the people that have reincarnated now into this present time, probably within the last 50, 60 years, are people that lived on Atlantis. And of course, Atlantis had the great and mighty crystal that powered everything. And it harnessed all the solar energy and the star energy and everything. And it was, there's several theories. Scientists think that it was something not quite nuclear, but something that was pretty powerful. And I guess they started using it to kill their enemies or upset their enemies, on the other side of the world. And that caused a chain reaction within the earth because of ego again and just insanity. And that caused the earth to shift its axis. And slowly, it didn't take place all at once, but Atlantis started breaking up, and it took several years. And I guess about 10,000 years ago was the final demise of Atlantis. But Mu was more, they said that when humans came into this planet, that it was more thought projections. And that's what Mu was. But in Atlantis, they were more physical, and they were creating, like we're doing now, cloning. We're making all these strange things with cloning, but they were making half human, half animals. And they used them as slaves to do their manual work and things. and some created these temples to heal them. So that was all going on in Atlantis. But look what's happening with it, with America now,
Yeah.
and what's going on in the whole world. I think it's just, a real parallel to what, went on then and what's going on now. We haven't learned our lesson, obviously.
Well, that's what's so sad about it, is we have not
is.
learned our lesson.
No, we haven't. It's crazy. But, we've got to learn our lessons. It's time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're running out of that time. And, and I can't, there's the compassionate, empathetic side of me that wants to say, well, humanity's been placed into this illusion. We're in this, matrix, which I like to call it. The matrix created by the, the global. I saw someone posted on the chat room, the global clowns. I like that. The global clowns have placed us in this, this matrix that this really disconnects us from ourselves and disconnects us from our potential. But, we really need to really reconnect with ourselves so we can know what's going on. Now, what are your thoughts? And we didn't get too much. I know you've had a lot of UFO experience and whatnot, but let me ask you this: the idea that recently NASA says there's a mysterious force field around the Earth with the Van Allen belt, and maybe we're in quarantine. I love this idea that we're in quarantine. Not that I love it. I wish we weren't in quarantine, but the concept of it. What are your thoughts on that? Is Earth in a quarantine, or are we just not ready to move into bigger realms of consciousness and the universe?
Well, I think that's why there's been a lot of accidents with all of these different, probes that we're sending up there, and especially these independent people that have sent up, these different probes going up. They've exploded. What was it? It wasn't the Tesla. What was the one that? I think Brandon. What is it? Do you know what I'm talking about? That it exploded as it was being launched.
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, but there's been some really strange accidents, and I think we are, until we learn to get along on this planet. Who wants us out there? I can't imagine anybody would, and we just have to become more spiritual, and so we can become a part of the galactic brotherhood or group, the family out there, because I think there are so many different beings out there. I think it's probably like Star Wars, in the cantina scene with all these different kind of aliens, and they don't all look like us. There's blue ones, there's giants, there's some that look like insects and reptilians. So I think there's so many different types of aliens, and I think we have to stop thinking that we're the only life in the whole universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if humanity finally got to that place to realize that we're not the only being in the planet, and yes, our behavior does affect the rest of the universe, and wouldn't it be nice to, be aware of that, to alter our behavior, in other words, to become a part of a universal family versus a global family? And yeah, I'm always all about one human world, one family, one love, and on the planet, but what about the universe? We forget about that.
Right. And what's really interesting about the mysterious force, according to Daniel Baker, director of the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics, the electron barrier exists in the Van Allen belts, a pair of donut-shaped belts that ring the Earth, teeming with protons and electrons. The Earth's magnetic field holds the belts in place, but the scientists say that the electrons in these belts, which travel at nearly the speed of light, are being blocked by some invisible force that reminded him of some kind of shield used in television series like Star Trek to stop alien energy weapons from vaporizing starships. So it kind of makes you wonder what is it a quarantine for us? I wonder, or is it a protection?
That might be both.
It might be both. You're right.
It might be
Good thought.
both because
Uh-huh.
we're not really at a place where we can defend ourselves from an
Uh-uh.
advanced life form as well.
Right.
We might be the ones who destroy other life forms, so there might be
Mm-hmm.
a double meaning for that.
It
Absolutely,
could. Yeah.
and,
Right.
and isn't that a shame?
Or is it, or is it a shield put there by the bad guys to keep the good guys away?
Ah.
Ah,
Oh.
that's a good third component.
Ah.
Didn't think about that. Yeah, I was
Very
wondering where
good.
they were that day they were supposed to come land back in 2008. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it makes you wonder. There's just so many strange things out there, so many mysteries in the world that we just don't know. I wish I had just maybe a little fraction of all the answers. I don't. I wish I did, but I think that's what keeps us going, the mystery of life, doesn't it?
Oh yes, absolutely. And well, even just having a glimpse of the answers is enough. I mean, it really is. We anyone who has all the answers, I run away from. People that are like, "Oh, well, this is what you got to do." No, it doesn't work that way. Those who know do not know. That's the way I look at it. Those who know that they do not know know. And that's
Very
from the Tao
good.
Te Ching. That's from Lao Tzu.
I like that.
That's from Lao Tzu. Those
Great.
who think they know do not know. And I'm always weary of that because that's what got us into this mess on the first place.
That's right.
I mean, the
That's
idea that, oh, yes, well, we must conquer Earth and we must harness its powers and energy. And it's really turned into a mess of things, hasn't it?
right.
um,
Right.
Betsy, in your book, you talk about ways that people can make a difference by getting back to a natural way of life, saving our environment.
Right.
What are some of the suggestions that you can share with us?
Well, some of the things are like plastics. Um, you know, when I was growing up, there was no plastic. That came a little bit later with Tupperware and some of those things. But, I know we can't get away from plastics totally. And it's a
Did you
wonderful
have metal?
miracle. It really is. But, recycle. I see at the park, I have a park nearby that I take my dog to, and people just throw plastic all over the place, and there's no recycling cans to throw any of that in. So I've gotten after the city, and of course they go, well, we can't put it in, we can't afford it. And it really just boggles my mind. But I pick up the plastic and take it home and then recycle it. And, if you can get more glass, at least that breaks down into the earth naturally. Try and get away from all the plastic bags. Oh my gosh, we get them at the grocery stores. Take a cloth bag to, get your groceries in. Try and get away from all that plastic. That's one of the things. And plastics just drive me crazy.
I'm probably aging myself here, but I remember when the 2-liter Coke bottles were still in glass.
Yeah, right.
They were very heavy, but they were glass.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and also, just buying things that don't have all these horrible ingredients in it that are going to be harmful. Toothpaste has fluoride in it, and that's been proven to be toxic.
Yeah.
And just buying more natural things and organic things. I know it gets kind of expensive and people can't always afford all these organic things. But like I said, the more we buy organic, we'll force these big manufacturers to start taking out stuff. And you've noticed that they're taking out this corn syrup that's been in all kinds of things. They're taking it out because people want real sugar,
I got to point this out. This is very strange, and I don't know if it's a phenomenon happening where you are locally, but in our grocery stores, they are selling Mexican Coca-Cola and Fanta and whatnot with real cane sugar, and it's twice as much.
Really?
With cane sugar.
Oh, really?
It's like, I remember when Coca-Cola had sugar. We didn't pay extra for it. I mean, not that I want to promote Coca-Cola, by all means. That's another problem. But it just, It was just I found it very strange that now there's a phenomenon. People want to buy Mexican soda versus American soda.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Huh. Oh, wow. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep.
Another thing, we have these new mercury light bulbs and they're supposed to save
Oh,
on
thank you for
energy,
bringing that up.
but they're mercury. Oh my gosh. Mercury is bad. It's harmful. And if you get it on you, you've got to get it right off. It's really toxic. I prefer the incandescent light bulbs, but they're pushing. I don't know what you think of the mercury, but I don't think much of them.
It's funny. My roommate went to go buy some light bulbs the other day. I said, "We need some light bulbs." He's like, "Well, we only have those eco ones." I'm like, "Do not bring me the eco light bulb. That is far from eco.
You're right.
It breaks. You're supposed to call the hazardous waste people if it breaks in your living room, and nobody does. You're supposed to throw them away through hazmat, and nobody does.
Nobody
So it
does.
ends up
Yeah.
in the landfill, getting
Right.
crushed, and all that
Yeah.
mercury is being dropped into the soil.
Right.
Nobody
Right.
gets that. Nobody
No.
gets that.
No.
I used to use those, and the one in my bedroom, I noticed that right before I got rid of it, when you turn it on, you could hear a very extremely high pitched like squealing sound, very very faintly. When you turn it off, it goes away. So I'm thinking, is that either the sound of the electricity, or is it emitting this like frequency that is like messing with your head?
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. There was a study that they were emitting frequencies, and it will cause illness.
Right. Right.
So people aren't aware of that.
Boy, with all the negative things we have out there, no wonder people are getting cancer. It's just incredible.
It truly is. It truly is. Now, what would be the main message you would want to give as far as what you're trying to get across to everybody through the release of this new book? What is your message to everybody in reference to the book and what you want us to learn from it?
Well, just returning to a simpler life, a more spiritual life, a more compassionate life, and a more caring life. I think that's so important, that we're reconnecting with all the elements again, that we are understanding that everything is one, that we are connected to all these things. And I think that will be a great start at practicing ceremony and get back into talking to everything. Even if people think you're crazy, just go out and do it anyway. Talk to a tree, and I think that's just a great way to do it. And
Absolutely.
Once we get back into reconnecting with the living library, like I said, we connect with the mysteries, the age-old secrets of spirit beings that watch and guide the planet. We get back to everything and balance again. We're back in balance. And I think that is so important, to be back in balance again with Mother Earth.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. I can't help but agree. Now,
Thank
Betsey,
you.
where can everybody find you? Where can they find your book?
Well, my website is betseylewis.com, and Betsey spelled a little bit different. It's Betsey. Lewis is LEWIS.com, and I have my books on there, and of course I've got my Earth News One blog, and I'm putting everything on there with these earthquakes, the booms that are being heard, the solar events that are going on that affects the Earth, and earthquakes, volcanoes that are going off. We're getting a lot of volcanoes going off right now. And if I feel anything, because I've been getting dizzy when these earthquakes start happening, so I give my predictions, UFO reports, a lot of those things on my Earth News One blog, so be sure and check that out. And my books are all on Amazon.com, so be sure and check them out there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Thank
Betsey.
you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you all next week here on the Just Bernard Show. Have a wonderful week. We love you.
Thanks so much.